like to introduce speakers from the manufacturer and public comments. With that, we will start with Dr. Linsley, Dr. Andrew Linsley. Please go ahead. And each speaker will have 5 minutes. And just to be fair to all, I will actually remind you if you're still speaking at the 5 minutes, I will have to cut the discussion.
All right, well, great. Can everyone hear me all right?
Go ahead.
Okay, good morning. My name is Dr. Andrew Linsley, and I'm an allergist immunologist with 10 years of clinical and research experience in asthma management and pathogenesis. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with this esteemed panel. Like many others in attendance today, I have watched my patients and my own loved ones gasp for breath during asthma exacerbations with both fear and exhaustion. Apologies. Like many others in attendance today, I have watched my patients, my own loved ones, gasp for breath during asthma exacerbations with both fear and exhaustion in their eyes. Asthma's harmful effects on patient health and well-being are well documented. From diminished pulmonary function to reduced quality of life, severe asthma affects hundreds of thousands of patients each year in the United States. An exacerbation in this disease can be terrifying for patients, as it would be for anyone who suddenly finds themselves struggling to breathe. An unacceptable number of patients each year end up in the emergency room or hospital or even die from exacerbations of this grave disease. Amgen and AstraZeneca recognize that severe asthma is devastating for patients. We are excited to have developed Tezepelumab as a potential new treatment option. With regard to ICER's evaluation, we would like to highlight 3 central concerns with the report that we asked the panel to consider during their deliberations today. First, the asthma mortality rate used in the report is inaccurate and underestimates asthma mortality. Second, ICER's current evidence rating for Tezepelumab's net health benefit significantly understates the clear statistical superiority of Tezepelumab to standard of care, as demonstrated by rigorous clinical trial data. Third, the report undervalues the clinically meaningful changes seen in patient-reported outcomes with Tezepelumab. These inaccuracies adversely affect the ICER cost-effectiveness calculation, undervalue Tezepelumab's ability to help patients, and may adversely affect patient access to this innovative new treatment. Our first major point is that the mortality risk per asthma hospitalization needs to align with observed asthma patients' death rates. There's almost a 3-fold underestimation of the risk of death among patients hospitalized with asthma between ICER's model versus data from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control for the period of 2018 and 2019. Mortality rate is a fundamental driver in ICER's model. Underestimating asthma's associated deaths makes ICER's model less representative of expected real-world outcomes. Furthermore, by underestimating the mortality risk of hospitalization, the cost per quality for Tezepelumab is highly overestimated. Our second major point is that ICER's C++ confidence rating of Tezepelumab's net health benefit is not aligned with the robustness of the clinical trial data. The Navigator phase 3 trial rigorously evaluated Tezepelumab's efficacy and safety as an add-on therapy in subjects with uncontrolled asthma managed with high-intensity standard of care therapy. In this well-powered phase 3 trial, all of the primary and key secondary endpoints were achieved by exceeding the 95% certainty level. These endpoints included exacerbation reduction, lung function, symptom control, and health-related quality of life measurements. We and other stakeholders, including the American Thoracic Society, believe that an evidence rating of at least B+, denoting moderate certainty of small or substantial health benefit, is far more consistent with the available clinical data. To be clear, the evidence does not support the conclusion that Tezepelumab only offers a comparable net health benefit when weighed against standard of care treatments. For our third point, we'd like to highlight the meaningful changes in patient-reported outcomes seen in Tezepelumab clinical trials. One of the biggest drivers for ICER's model is the changes in patient daily quality of life. In the Navigator study, the proportion of treatment responders was higher in the Tezepelumab arm than the placebo arm for all patient-reported outcomes. I would like to specifically call out the Navigator results obtained using the St. George Respiratory Questionnaire, or the SGRQ, a well-validated and FDA-recognized instrument for measuring quality of life in patients with respiratory disease. As with other patient-reported outcomes, a higher proportion of patients had an SGRQ response in the Tezepelumab group than in the placebo group, and we observed a mean improvement at the population level that exceeded the minimum clinically important difference, or MCID. These results further underscore the meaningful impact that tezepelumab treatment can provide to patients living with severe uncontrolled asthma. In conclusion, we believe that ICER's assessment undervalues tezepelumab and its ability to help patients. We ask that the panel take into account these shortcomings when deliberating on value. We also ask ICER to include our suggested adjustments in the final report to better reflect a rigorous and balanced assessment, and importantly, an assessment that values patient outcomes. Thank you for your attention in this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Linsley. I don't know, Brett or David, if you would like to comment, maybe especially on the mortality rate.
So I'd like to comment on a couple of those. On the mortality issue, Dr. Linsley, and I know Brett can go into this further, but I'm just wondering, if we used your numbers, wouldn't we end up with more people dying in the United States from asthma than die each year? Is it that you believe that more than 3,500 people die each year from asthma in the US?
No, the number that we suggested using was actually based on the 3,500 number, as well as the number from CDC of patients that were hospitalized with an indication of asthma. That's what we're using as our denominator, versus using the 2.2 million that have severe asthma in the entire United States, and then rolling that into the ICER model to derive the denominator based on, I believe, first year of the ICER model projections.
But you understand that the model, the way you're suggesting doing it, would end up with more deaths than occur each year.
Well, if we're using the numerator, which is the 3,500, and then we're directly deriving the number from CDC data rather than using the model to generate the number. So if we use the number from CDC for deaths, and we use the number of from the CDC for hospitalizations for severe asthma, that's where we're deriving our number for expected deaths per hospitalization.
I know Brett wants to answer this, so I'll shut up.
Well, it's actually, the answer is in the report. I already explained it. It's the lower end of the one-way sensitivity analysis. That was the upper end of the input that we used. So to say that we didn't incorporate that is false. We did. And then to your point on quality of life, and then I should say the second point is, if you really want to impact mortality, we would have seen a direct input from the trial where mortality was reduced by rate ratio. We didn't observe that. So I think that that's another important point. And then around quality of life changes, we knew that you submitted the EQ5D in the trial population, and that information wasn't provided. So we were forced to use a mapped relationship between AQLQ and EQ5D, which is fairly consistent actually with past modeling, where differences in utility range anywhere from 0.03 to 0.06, and our estimate was 0.04. So we're using really consistent evidence from asthma modeling in the literature.
And we certainly appreciate the dialogue and back and forth conversations that have taken place to try to get the best numbers for mortality rate. I don't think either the number we suggested or the number you suggested is perfect. Each one takes assumptions into account, but the model is very sensitive to that mortality per hospitalization number. And as your sensitivity analysis shows, by adjusting it to the number we suggested, the cost per quality goes down by 25%. So it's a critical input that I think should, be as accurate as possible.
Yeah, but Dr. Linsley, we wouldn't, under that scenario, we would be assuming that deaths go only through hospitalization. So that actually contradicts one of your other public comments. That's the first point. Second point, there's no way that we could increase beyond that point. Otherwise, as David had said, we'd actually be calculating more deaths than we even observe in the United States. So that's why it's included as this in the sensitivity analysis. And the estimate's still 300,000 per quality. So regardless, we include both estimates, and we feel like we've addressed that comment.
Well, thank you all. Thank you for excellent discussion. It clearly highlights some of the points we all need to be thinking about. I think next is Kyle Weitzen. Please go ahead, same thing, 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. And thank you to members of the Midwest CEPAC and our colleagues for ICER for this opportunity. My name is Kyle Weitzen. I am the head of the Sanofi Genzyme Health Economics and Value Assessment Group, and I'm joined by my colleague, Dr. Megan Harden, who is a pulmonologist and a member of the Sanofi Genzyme Medical Organization. We are both very pleased to participate in today's discussion. Dupilumab is a fully human monoclonal antibody that inhibits interleukin-4 and 13 signaling by specifically binding to the interleukin-4R alpha subunit that is shared by these receptor complexes. Dupilumab's unique mechanism of action leads to suppression of type 2 inflammation, including broad activity against multiple type 2 effector cells, such as B cells, eosinophils, and IgE. Dupilumab has been approved in the US as an add-on maintenance treatment for patients aged 6 years and older with moderate to severe asthma characterized by eosinophilic phenotype or with oral corticosteroid-dependent asthma. Dupilumab is also approved in the US for patients 6 years and older with uncontrolled moderate to severe atopic dermatitis and patients with inadequately controlled chronic rhinosinusitis with nasal polyposis. We first engaged the Midwest CEPAC in 2018 as part of ICER's review of biologic therapies for the treatment of moderate to severe asthma associated with type 2 inflammation. During this review, ICER rightfully emphasized the importance of demonstrating the long-term safety and effectiveness of asthma therapies. As ICER noted in its November report, we have completed a 2-year open-label extension study of almost 3,000 adult and adolescent patients. When combined with the patients who had previously participated in the phase 3 trial, this represents up to 3 years of exposure to dupilumab. This trial demonstrated a safety profile generally consistent with the 1-year trials, and this extension study demonstrated sustained reduction in exacerbation rates and, importantly, as we've discussed today, improvement in lung function and asthma control. As noted in ICER's report, dupilumab significantly reduced oral corticosteroid or OCS dose compared to placebo in patients with severe OCS-dependent asthma, and it is the only biologic therapy to have an indication for patients with OCS-dependent asthma. Sanofi appreciates and fully agrees with ICER's efforts to draw attention to the significant health inequalities that exist in the US, as they disproportionately impact African Americans and Latinx suffering from asthma. Specifically, we commend ICER's development of a Health Improvement Distribution Index, and we look forward to seeing it used in future reviews. We see the HIDI as an important approach in calling attention to historically underserved patient populations where safe and effective interventions can produce disproportionate health gains based on the increased prevalence of disease relative to the general population. We share ICER's recognition of this important and urgent issue, and we are currently engaged in similar initiatives to ensure that we are working to improve the health and lives of all patients equally. At Sanofi, our clinical studies do not exclude participants based on minority status, gender, sexual orientation, or age. We're also working to enhance the selection of trial sites to include more diverse, population-dense communities and to involve more diverse investigators in the goal of increasing minority participation in our trials. Lastly, dupilumab's price was established prior to its approval for the treatment of moderate to severe asthma. As we discussed at the New England CEPAC this past July, it was established through Sanofi's pricing policy that offers a clear rationale for our pricing, which includes, among other things, the holistic assessment of our medicine's value and our commitment to affordable access for patients. It's also worth noting that this price aligned with ICER's determination of the value-based price for dupilumab in atopic dermatitis, and it's in line with other asthma biologics. Since the launch of dupilumab, Sanofi has only made modest and predictable price increases in line with this policy for responsible pricing. And this is reflected in the fact that dupilumab, as well as no other Sanofi medicine, has ever been included in ICER's list of products that have taken unsubstantiated price increases. Thank you again for the opportunity to participate in this meeting and in this important process that began last May. Dr. Hardin and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Weitzen. I'm not sure if there are questions. I would just say that we appreciate hearing your interest and hopefully other manufacturer in actually enhancing diversity in the populations included in these studies. That is for sure important. I'm actually gonna just move to the next speaker. And our next speaker is Kenneth Mendez. Please go ahead. Same thing.
Great. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Terrific. Thank you. I'm glad I only have to do this once every 4 years because a lot of this as a patient, I just want to speak as a patient organization because a lot of this stuff is quite complicated for the normal person. And I think the approach I'd like to take is looking at the voting questions first, just again, simply from a patient perspective on this and what we see as an organization, because ICER's executive summary says Tezepelumab's evidence shows that there are benefits from it. And it says on balance, we rate the net health benefit of Tezepelumab added to standard of care therapy without biologics compared with standard of care therapy alone in adults and adolescents with severe uncontrolled asthma is comparable or better. So the first question, it seems, in looking at your questionnaire could be yes. However, when you look at questions 2 through 4, they feel a little bit misleading when and taken out of context because to ask a simple yes or no question for net health benefits forces an answer that's out of context, it seems, on how these treatments work. So let's simplify this. Assume you've got Advil and Tylenol when you need to treat someone for a headache. Some people find that ibuprofen, also known as Advil, works better than acetaminophen, also known as Tylenol, but others find that Tylenol works better than Advil for treating a headache. So this may relate to the underlying pathway that causes the headache. We've talked about that here. In a similar way, there are different pathways that lead to asthma, and in some blocking a certain pathway may work, but in another person, the same pathway may not be active and blocking it has no effect. So that speaks to the importance of phenotyping asthma and using that information to inform the choice of biologic. And so without this, comparing biologics is a bit like comparing Tylenol and Advil, and I think that gets to the case here when you're comparing Tezepelumab with dupilumab. Just moving on from that, as you consider questions 5 through 7, please keep in mind the patient voices that will speak after me. There are 3,500 people die each year from asthma, and it's one of the most challenging chronic conditions for Americans. And then you add to that climate change and its impact on air quality, and that adds further challenges to those living with asthma. So making new treatments available for the asthma community is a high priority. And then continuing on through questions 8 through 13, since Tezepelumab is not yet approved by the FDA and there's no price on it, answering these questions seems premature, and the questions do seem misleading. And I wish there was some way that the CTAF could rephrase these questions before you vote. I submitted them in our comments. But it does appear that Tezepelumab can have major positive effects for some. Finally, I do want to commend, as others have said, but also appeal to the CTAF, ICER staff, and the ICER board on how ICER communicates around these findings from this exercise. ICER staff rightly points out that health gains from a successful treatment like Tezepelumab could have consistent benefits across racial subgroups and would proportionately greater benefit Black Americans. We did a study last year that was a 15-year update. Black Americans are still 3 times more likely to die from asthma, 5 times more likely to be treated in an emergency room, and Black women have the highest mortality rate of any ethnic group. Puerto Rican Americans are twice as likely to be diagnosed with asthma. And then if you look at regional data for American Indians and Alaskan Natives, they have more frequently having asthma symptoms. So it's good that ICER has identified this. But I also note that ICER notes also that in clinical trials, they haven't been adequately enrolled by Black Americans, and we agree with ICER on that. But ICER should find a way, as I think you were trying to do here, to quantify whether disparities in the burden of a given disease mean that an average effectiveness has different implications for different groups. So in our comment letters, we highlight other areas of disagreement with ICER, but I want to focus on the outcomes of this specific exercise. It really matters what you say and how you publicize this. Tezepelumab uses a new mechanism of action and does represent a promising new treatment. And so next, I'd like to introduce you to Monique and Javon, again, from the patient perspective, a family we've followed in our AFA community and to whom we've provided support. And I hope their video shows the challenges of living with asthma and finding the right treatment, because there does remain a large unmet need for therapies that substantially improve the daily quality of life in patients with severe asthma. You can run the video now if you'd like.
My name is Monique Cooper, and I am not only a parent of a severe asthmatic, but I too have asthma.
Hi, I'm Javen Allison, and I was diagnosed with asthma at the age of 2. Living with asthma has been a journey that we never thought we would go through.
Javen was born a premature baby with severe complications. At 2 months old, I noticed his first breathing difficulties. His skull was moving rapid in and out as he was wheezing. I took him to the emergency room where they diagnosed him with bronchitis. Javen has always been a hyper kid struggling with anxiety and ADHD, which played a small part in him having asthma attacks. We didn't know how serious it was until he was 2 years old. One typical day when Javen was 4 years old, he was having fun being with family members, but he was also around environmental things that triggered his allergies. We picked Javen up and ran a few errands with him, and we noticed how weak he was. He was not able to walk on his own. His dad and I first thought it was signs of wanting to be picked up, but then he started coughing. We reached home, and Javen didn't even make it down the hallway before passing out on the floor. We immediately rushed him to the emergency room, where they told us that he was in distress. This is when we realized how serious this was. This was also his first of many ICU stays. Throughout this journey, we have had good days and bad days, but on both days, we are affected the same. Although he is having some great days now at the age of 13, we take off or leave early from work and school to see his pulmonologist on a biweekly basis. We make sure we stay on routine with his medications. Pump first thing in the morning, pump at night before bedtime. Make sure we cover all allergies so they won't trigger asthma. Javen plays sports and is always a fear with the what ifs. What if it's too hot and he gets exhausted and can't breathe? What if the activities are too much for him to handle? Before and after practice and game days, he takes the emergency inhaler to make sure his airways stay functioning for him. On his worst days, we take off from work and he's home from school due to being hospitalized after having attacks. Every year up until we reached middle school, Javen would have a good first week of school, attending every day. When we reached the second to third week, the complications would start. He would get sick with asthma and either be in the hospital and or home for days to weeks at a time, delaying his education. While in the hospital, we want to know if he's getting better up until the very last hour of being discharged because of our villain, we like to call asthma, and likes to come in, sneak back into Javen's lungs. When Javen was 10 years old, Javen was having a typical asthma day with difficulty breathing and on the nebulizer every 4 to 6 hours. That day, February 17, 2018, changed our lives when Javen wrote on the bathroom fog mirror, "Help me." He didn't have the strength to yell out to me while I was in the shower. We rushed him to the hospital, barely making it. That day, it took everything in him to breathe. The doctors were trying to figure out why, when giving him the proper medication for asthma, would everything else stop working functionally. Blood pressure low and then high, airways closing more and more, oxygen low. This nurse came in and noticed him from previous emergency visits and gave suggestions that saved Javen's life. He stayed in the ICU for a week. Over time, his symptoms gotten better, and Javen has not had a hospital stay since.
When it comes to things we would like to enjoy and be part of sometimes, it saddens me.
For instance, he can't be around dogs because he is allergic to them, and that's a trigger. We can't travel to states during time of high pollen season where it is snowing or cold, and then travel back to Florida where it is hot in that same time frame. Javen has had over 50 hospital visits due to asthma and several overnight ICU stays. Some families may not know how serious it is. It causes death if you don't take precaution to this disease. This experience is one experience where you don't take life for granted.
Well, thank you very much for Monique and Javen for sharing their experience. We really appreciate it. And I know Kenny had different points that we probably should respond to. However, I'm going to say let's go ahead and listen to the last patient representative here, and then we can decide to respond to them now or after the break. Okay, Brenda Young, please go ahead.
Hello, can you see me or hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I can't see. I'm Brenda Young. I'm a severe asthmatic. I've had severe asthma since 2010. I've had asthma all my life. I have been on prednisone for 30 years straight. I have tried 2 biologics. I've anaphylacted 2. We need more help. We need other drugs. I need to get off this prednisone that I have been on for so long. My life has not been great, my quality of life, my husband, my grandkids, my kids, finances. Some days are bad, some days are good. Right now, it's a stable period, meaning I'm still on all my prednisone and all my other medicines. We need more. We need more for severe asthma. Some days I can't even walk to the bathroom because my lungs are so bad, and it's not a far walk at all. I also know I'm not good with all the numbers you were all, quoting and throwing out, which I think are great, but I live it every day. There are some days I can't even get up. I do want to say, though, I got COVID, and I got through it, but it was tough. I needed friend support, family support. And also we have a different life every day. One day could be good, one day could be bad. 30 years on prednisone, which you all know, has caused so many side effects of everything else, which right now I can't see myself, but I couldn't even do my hair today, because I was just too weak and tired. So I had to throw it up. And the glaucoma and the bone joints and the osteoporosis, all that can set in because of steroids. We need this. We need new biologics. I'm willing to try anything because I need a miracle to have my life back with my husband, with my daughters, with my grandkids. I really thank you all for listening to me. I know that advocacy is big, but I need to let you know that I am living this every day of my life. So I just thank you so much today.
Well, Brenda, it's us who thank you very much for being here with us today, for sharing your experience. And we hear you. I just want you to know we hear you very loud and clear. I know we're at the time of our break. I do know there are a couple maybe points that will be worth discussing. But Steve, I'm going to suggest that we leave those till after the break.
I think that makes sense. Yes, we'll have time. So thank you. We're going to take a break now until 12:45 Midwest time, 1:45 Eastern for lunch. At that point, we'll come back for the further deliberation and the voting. So thank you to all of our public commenters very, very much indeed. And your comments will really inform a lot of the conversation that precedes the rest of the day. So we'll see you all back at 45 minutes after the hour. Thank you.